Welcome to the first of many videos going back in time to the media tour way back in October before the release of Endwalker. I am filming these during the 24-hour gap after the patch notes have gone live. So I have a lot more information than people who were asking these questions back in September and October. I have started this. This is the first of many videos. We are going to be doing this. I have them, the name on here is just the name I'm using to remember where I got the source, but remember that many of these interviews were asked by two people, so there were multiple people in the room. I have TLDR'd all of these questions, and we'll be referencing the answers over here so you can look ahead, and we will go through this, and I will add a lot of context, because with the fact that full patch notes are now live, there has been a live letter since these happened. We have a lot more information than the people that asked these questions do, but they did ask questions that also give us things that were not gone over those. Ignore all the typos and stuff. I'm not good at typing. I'm not good at reading or writing. Let's jump in. Narrative first, story first. These are going to be narrative-based questions. The categories were randomly decided by me across the 120 questions. And the first one is from the Mione and Shenpai interview. And it is, what helped drive the design of Garlemald and its destruction as a zone? A complete awareness that there is going to be some kind of story spoiler and stuff that they're not going to help tell us. Yoshibi responded by saying that Garlemald has appeared in the story time and time again. Typically, you would be going somewhere with less freedom than like the amount that Garlemald has kind of had on their citizens' everyday life, and they wanted to show, of course, the military. We're aware of that side of Garlemald, right? We're aware of the very like rigid side of Garlemald, but they wanted to show what an everyday Garlean would live like. Obviously, we're going there and it's in a devastated state, but if we look closely, we can see that their daily lives are not that different than ours. So you may find like a park, and that park might have a slide, and it'll remind you that in peaceful times, there would be citizens, they would have a life there, something that we're familiar with and we can relate to. And this is supposed to have a similar metaphor to our time exploring the relationships with Asians. Up until 4.x, we always kind of thought they were just raw evil, but since then we've come into a lot more knowledge to understand what their motivations are, where they come from, and it's no longer just a mask, but we've spent time with them through this expansion in 5.x. We've grown to appreciate them, and we are aware of more than just like a weird language in this far group of people, and we see them as ancients, and there's been a pivot there, and they're hoping that Garlemald will do the same thing. The next one here is from Dengeki. And this is our next Garlemald thing here, if I can spell Dengeki as I reference the things here. And this is going to be, Dengeki is a hard outlet to cover because Dengeki covers everything in Japanese. They're a Japanese outlet. And as a result, Dengeki questions tend to be very difficult to translate because their conversation, it's all posted in Japanese, and they tend to be more conversational because it being a Japanese dev and Japanese questions, they can have a little more back and forth as opposed to the English-speaking people. We have to ask a question, it has to be translated, we wait for Yoshi-P to talk, and then we wait for the translation. So it is this very question and answer style format, oftentimes with very little feedback. And so this is going to be a bit more of a conversation. And we're going to be talking about the cities and zones that you did get to experience from the media tour. We didn't get to see everything. In Yoshi-P's presentation before the tour, he talked about how these areas are open, but you know you're not getting access to everything, but it may feel spoilery. And there was no way to really put Garlemald in and not show some spoiler. As opposed to what they called Sibinia Island. I'm assuming it's Thavnir. And we've got Tower of Zotnir, the only dungeon open to the public. So were you worried about that? You know, and how do they decide, basically, effectively, this conversation's kind of, how do they decide what to show us on the media tour? And Yoshi said that he thought, well, there's a moon. Could we go to the moon? And then I realized I can't show people things on the moon because it would actually, we didn't even want to show the name of the moon. And so actually Garlemald relevant to that is actually less spoilery. Garlemald was really only the base of operations for the Garlemald Empire. So if you think about the landscape as an extension of that, it's quite different from like what we've done in the past. Garlemald is truly an imperial capital. So I thought with the lives of the inhabitants, very similar to the question we just went over. Let's talk about the atmosphere in which the way the country was operated and how the city using magical technology and science was developed. Obviously, with Sorrows of Verlit, he understood Gaius's feelings, but it's a story from his personal standpoint. And as the head of the division, that's very different than kind of viewing it as a zone. And so this was a chance for them to kind of show that. It has a modern design. There's a subway station and an atmosphere that's reminiscent of things that we've seen in things like Final Fantasy VI. And they actually followed up and like that's definitely a reference. Is that intentional? And he said no, that's since he joined Final Fantasy XIV has always been designing magical armor, and they were excited that we could have a taste of that. They then went and said, well, what about like the huge castle in the back of Garlemald? Will we go to that castle? And he said the former castle in the center of the empire, that was one of the most magnificent and largest castles, but for some reason, it looks like, I don't know, it looks like, of course, you're going to need to rush in there to find out. So we would need to go in there. And, when we think back to the trailer, maybe there's something in the trailer that we've seen that would tell us a little bit about that. The next city is they did talk about Old Charlayan, which is the base city, and this is an atmosphere which is reminiscent of like a port city in Greece or Rome, where he wants the word scenic to be the description. So you can see how this conversation really expands and expands. It's something very neat about trying to cover Dengeki. I have trouble gathering all of it because it really doesn't translate horribly well. But there's something here that is nice. And so they go on, and I split this into a separate question that said there's a facility called the Baldesian Annex in the city, but when you entered, the music theme from Final Fantasy V played. What's going on with that? And then talking about Thavnair, where there's southeast style ruins. And he went on and said, originally, I made a lot of forests in Final Fantasy XIV, but this so-called Asian tropics were the place for Thavnair, and so I'm expressing that more directly. I'm sorry the Mediator can only show you the zone, but there is a deformed Tower of Zot in the instance that I experienced, and as you can predict by the name, in the form you're fighting against the Maga Sisters, and I can't talk about why those sisters are there. I can't talk about what they're doing in the main scenario. I can't really talk about any of this, but I can tell you that's the first dungeon in 6.0. And he just doesn't really answer that. He just kind of moves on. And this is the thing about these lore-based categories. You end up with a whole lot of him bouncing around, trying not to answer too much. Now, Zeppla went on to talk about that for Shadowbringers, they actually had the team, this would have been a long time ago, visit places like Saudi Arabia. And for Endwalker, did you go to the moon? Yoshi P said, he didn't, he has a lot of connections. Not a lot of them are in places like NASA. And so they couldn't go there this time, but that they did visualize it in their heads. He's really looking forward to when we go to the moon to see what players think and if we get what they are trying to show there. She went on to follow up and say, is it hollow? Is it hollow? And he said, well, what about the real moon? There's urban legends that say that on the other side, there's a secret alien base, or maybe it's hollow. Well, I don't know. You'll just have to look forward to it and see what we did there. Now, Dengeki went on to what kind of story for the role quests after level 80. What's going on with the role quests after level 80 in the finale of the Dawn in, I believe that's Shadowbringers is the translation. I never remember. Jet Black Villains is the other one. This is talking finale of the Dawn is that's Endwalker, right? Endwalker? I think that's Endwalker. So So based on the answer, he said that this time we're going to have 5 role quests. We know this now. They're all going to have stories related to Eorzea and the leaders of the Eastern region. We've separated the ranged and physical DPS for role quests. And currently in Shadowbringers, they've already kind of talked about this, and then Dengeki notes a previous coverage article. And so this will be about the leaders such as like Raubon and Hien and Connie, and so this should be something that the role quests help tie us back to leaders this time. So for anybody that's wondering, hey, is it going to be like last time where it's not directly related to the roles per se and tends to kind of attach to the MSQ? It does sound a little bit like that. MMORPG.com is going to follow up on that and say, will job role quests return? Now, we've already had this gone over in the live letter. We've already had this gone over in the preliminary patch notes. It's, of course, in the final patch notes. Job role quests. And he did say we added one. We did add, so they went to 5. And then this question ended up being interpreted more in, did we just take a break from individual job quests to go to role quests in because we were on the first? Will we go back to having job quests? Now, we already know, based on the live letter and the patch notes, that we're not. But the answer here was, at level 80, we wanted to do one last job quest to cleanly bring each of the jobs to a conclusion. And I'm not saying the possibility is 0. But we have a lot of talented writers on our team. We have some fresh blood, and they've come in, and I would love for them to be able to explore stories that revolve around new characters that they introduce in the lore. So if there's ever a reason, an opportunity to kind of say, for example, introduce a new black mage and take you on another journey, the possibility is definitely there. Kind of sounded like, well, why would we even have a reason to be learning from people? If we're capable of doing all this, who would we even be learning from at this point? And then he also noted that it would give these writers a chance to have a fresh take, to have a fresh start, because some of these arcs have been written across as many as 3 different writers. And so you can imagine that it would be incredibly frustrating as a new writer trying to express your own voice and inheriting everything that previous writers did. And so there's a nice clean break at 80, and if they ever bring them back, they would bring them back as the start of something new and they've brought that to an end. We'll go through 6.0 without any job quests, and if they ever bring them back in the future, there would be that clean break. And so that is the end of first of several of these. I have many topics to go. I have given them clever little names as we record during this day right before Endwalker goes live. So enjoy these. They may have spoilers pre-Endwalker, but because I'm recording them before I play Endwalker, they will keep you safe from Endwalker spoilers.